Okay, we are now live on Facebook. So, good evening, and thank you so much for taking some time this evening to join us. If you've joined us on the Zoom portion, feel free to chat in your questions either in the chat or you can chat in anonymously in the Q&A portion. Just check the checkbox that says I wish to remain anonymous. If you're on the Facebook Live and you would like to chime in, feel free to post underneath the post and we'll queue up those comments for our discussion here as well. So again, at any time, feel free to weigh in on this conversation. And tonight I'm excited to introduce you to Carla Bailey Smith, who is running as a candidate for Illinois District 88 representative. Carla?
Thank you, Kelsey. Last week, my campaign managers and I decided that we should respond to the online conversations around going back to school. On Friday, I talked to two parents and we discussed the choice that parents are faced with. Tonight, we are discussing the situation for teachers. Their choices are limited too. Due to ethical concerns, I do not have any current or even retired teachers who wished to be seen and heard on this platform, but I do have some written experiences that I will share after my conversation with our guest. And our guest tonight is Samay Giwala. Is that correct? Did I get it?
Yes.
Samay Giwala, who is the Assistant Director of Organizing and Policy with Illinois Families for Public Schools. He will speak to the concerns that he's heard from teachers and unions. So thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. And Samay, please go ahead and tell us about your organization and the kind of work that you're doing during this pandemic.
Sure. Illinois Families for Public Schools. It's fairly self-explanatory. We're a group of primarily parents, grandparents, and community members who are interested in equitable schooling across the state. What we mean is properly funded schools and schools that use best principles and establish research to teach students and to make sure that all students are being taught and have the resources to be able to learn effectively, and that teachers and principals are listened to, and that state policy is guided by families, teachers, principals, in order to, make the schools as good as they should be. We have a lot of smart people in the state. We have a lot of capable families, but due to the way that schools are funded, due to federal and state policy, we don't see those results. And you hear all these things about, oh, Illinois schools, what are they? I'd rather send my kid to like a private school, or, oh, they're not as good as schools in Texas or California. And that we know that's not true. What we know that schools across the state have very high performing students, but they just don't have the resources to succeed in ways that they should. And then they're put into positions where it's very difficult to succeed. And we're looking at, the reaction to the coronavirus. Early this year, we were working with parents in Waukegan who were having problems just getting the packets and learning programs because
for the remote learning.
Yeah, for remote learning, because the districts were thrown in so fast.
Right.
But now we've seen that districts have learned and made up from those mistakes, and it certainly is better than the situation that we've seen in other states, where sure, the learning is being done in person, but kids are sick, teachers are sick, parents are sick, and you can't learn if family members are sick, and the health is the most important thing. I mean, I hate to sound very morbid, but you can't learn if your teacher's dead.
Yes,
I mean,
yes, yeah, and in our conversation on Friday, the one thing that was in the backs of our minds, but we didn't actually say out loud is, um, for the schools that are going back to any level of in-person learning, how many teachers are going to die before they close the schools?
yeah,
That's it people are thinking it, and
yeah,
that's a very harsh reality.
yeah. I mean, I personally live in Chicago, and the local principal has been recruiting substitutes. So I've signed up as an emergency substitute because he knows that it's
Mhm.
simply just a matter of time, and he's been urging everyone to do remote learning
Mhm.
because the number of people we can get out and learning
Right.
effectively means that his staff is in a better place. And
Right.
I know I don't want to sound like a doomsayer, but it's very difficult to try and
Mhm.
sugarcoat this, that we're
Right.
putting people at risk.
Yeah.
And then the cost. I mean,
Yes. It's human life. The cost is human life.
yeah,
And long-term wellness, or rather, long-term illness, because we're unfortunately seeing people who survive
yeah,
having COVID, but have debilitating health issues
yeah,
after they've essentially recovered. But fatigue. I just read a story yesterday about someone who had a double lung transplant.
yeah. Yeah, we today I heard about a college football player at Indiana. He's a offensive lineman,
Hmm.
probably top 2% of the healthiest people in America. He went through a week in an emergency room, and he reported for practice, and now has a heart murmur, and
Hmm.
they didn't see it. And this is an offensive lineman for a Big Ten
Right.
school is
Right. So a young, very healthy, very athletic
yeah,
person.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So it's very serious.
what happens when you get a special needs student?
Hmm.
Um,
Right. Right.
so
So does your organization make recommendations to school
yes,
districts?
our recommendation is to go 100% remote.
Okay, and that's across the entire state.
Yeah, across the entire state. And I mean, especially McLean County the cases are rapidly increasing.
Yes, they are.
Um, and so areas where there is a quick increase, especially among young people, is an area that we'd like to, be as cautious as possible.
Hmm.
Yeah, there haven't been the sheer numbers that you're seeing in other parts of the state, but I mean, it could very rapidly turn into, I mean, look at Madison and St. Clair County. There was nothing, and then over the course of
So
the week,
so those are
and that's a
cases that,
very different county.
right.
But
So are those is that in Wisconsin?
oh no, I'm sorry. Madison and St. Clair are the two counties across the river from St. Louis. So East St.
Okay. So
Louis,
in have
Alton.
they already gone back to school?
No, no, the numbers shot up over the summer.
Hmm.
They thought they had everything under control,
Okay.
and boom, it just happened. And that was before people went back to school. That was before
Right.
Edwardsville,
Hmm.
has even got there. So,
Right. Right.
um, and
Um,
so what happens if we do go back to school, a county where you think things are under control,
hmm.
in a day it changes.
Right. And one concern that I certainly have as a parent, as a community member, I have friends who are teachers, is that the current response from our local school districts when specific questions were posed to them about how are you going to handle it when there is a case, what is your procedure if a student in a class tests positive, how, what are you going to, does the whole class quarantine, what is the procedure? And every variation of that question, every answer is, that is the responsibility of the county health department. So then my next concern as a parent, as a friend of educators and staff members, and as the fact that in my own home, my husband is a transplant recipient and takes immunosuppressants every day. So he's compromised.
Yeah.
And, if my son does go to in-person learning and brings it home to dad, that could be devastating.
Yeah.
And I would like to know if I'm very concerned that our county health department is not necessarily equipped to handle a dramatic increase in COVID cases, and so that's a definite concern.
Yeah, I mean, that's the worst thing you can do to a organization like the health department, is to throw a dangerous situation at them. And
Right.
quite frankly, it's not a county health department's job to determine how schools are going to handle this. The school itself should have a plan.
Yeah. And the response, certainly the response from District 87 is, that's the responsibility of the health department. The county health department will make those decisions. That is the response that I read from District 87. I will admit I didn't review the response from Unit 5. So if somebody out there has read that or would like to look at that while we're talking, then you can tell me if Unit 5 has made a different declaration. And, I also want to point out, if anybody's listening who maybe is not as familiar with McLean County, we not only have, these two school districts here, we have a rural school district, Olympia, and we have Illinois State University, who is bringing back a portion of their students for in-person learning, and we have Illinois Wesleyan University, who are allowing students back on campus for a hybrid experience. Some classes will be online, and some classes will be in person with modifications. And Wesleyan has a plan in place. ISU has plans in place to limit the number of students in classrooms. They have taken the time to measure rooms at ISU and at Illinois Wesleyan so that they know how many students they can have in the rooms safely.
Yeah, and I'm sure they have adequate PPE. That's another big issue we're seeing, is that schools don't have a plan for how much PPE they're going to need.
Okay.
And a school like ISU probably has the ability to order in however much they need.
Right.
And I mean, as an aside, what is U High's plan? Are they planning on?
We talked about that on Friday, and I didn't review that before we started, so I don't actually remember.
It's not a good sign.
I don't actually remember right this second, but I will tell you that one of the parents that I spoke with on Friday, her older son is a student at U High, and she is sending him back, and she feels reasonably comfortable with the plan that they have made for U High.
That is something else we're seeing, is that districts are not communicating effectively. It shouldn't be. They'll send an email the last minute to parents saying, "Oh yeah, by next Tuesday we need you to choose how you're going to handle this."
Yes. We got as parents in District 87, we got the email for the updated plan with a response to a large Google Doc list of questions signed by over 500 community members and parents. We got the answers to those questions on Friday, and our decision has to be made by the end of the day tomorrow, August 4th. And it's the same for Unit 5. Unit 5 parents have to make that decision in person or at home. And with District 87, it's fully in person or fully online. And with Unit 5, they're going a couple of days a week and being home a couple of days a week, which is, of course, incredibly difficult for parents who need to figure out work and childcare, you know, with a 2-day-a-week situation like that is very difficult.
And, you know, these change because, you know, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, District 5 said, oh, yeah, we'll be back, you know, 100%. And now it changes. And how do parents, you know, react to something like that? And then I believe District 87, you know, you pick remote and you can't go back in until what, next semester?
That is correct. If you, with District 87, if you choose the fully online format, which is outsourced to Edmentum, I'm seeing a comment from one of our attendees that you have to wait. You can switch at the second quarter if things change.
That's still quite a bit of time,
right?
And we don't know what's going to happen between then and now. Obviously, and that's what another thing we've seen across the state is that parents are, you know, obviously the district is going to let you go remote if you feel your child is in danger. So now parents are sort of saying, oh yeah, we'll be there, but hedging their bets, essentially saying we'll be there. And then the district says, oh yeah, sure, look, we've got a great plan. So many parents are signing up to come to school. And then the day before school, half of those kids suddenly go remote. How's the district supposed to respond to that? And it's not those parents' fault. Those parents are making very smart decisions. But, you know, that upends the schedules of the teachers, it upends the planning, and it would be better to simply have remote across the board and have planning so that we don't have people like this. Or, you know, a spike happens and the kids who are there all have to suddenly go remote, parents have to change plans.
Right.
It's really just not fair.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm going to go ahead and read some responses I got. I had a couple of people, I asked people questions and I got some responses that I'd like to read. And these are people who, for a variety of reasons, are not able to or to be seen and heard on a platform like this.
Oh yeah, I mean, so many people are afraid to talk.
So I asked a local teachers union representative, have you had any teachers contact you and say they feel unsafe working in a classroom at this time? The answer is yes. Some teachers have told me they are concerned about a safe return. The BEA has focused on issues involving social distancing, testing, contact tracing, and issues surrounding quarantines. Teachers have also voiced concerns about whether or not they will be able to teach remotely this semester. The number of remote teachers turns on the number of students who depends upon the number of students who choose remote learning, and the district will not know that number until the registration cutoff date, which is tomorrow, August 4th. And then the next question I asked was, does your union or the state of Illinois offer any protections or alternatives to teachers? As in, are teachers able to choose online instruction? And the answer is that the current plan for instruction this fall includes a dedicated staff of remote instructors and a separate staff of in-person teachers. Those who wish to teach remotely must apply for what amounts to an in-district transfer for the fall semester, because presumably they're not teaching the traditional district or Unit 5 curriculum, they're teaching Edmentum. If a teacher is denied a remote position, then the only protections that I am aware of at this time are provided under a federal law that essentially extends FMLA, the Family Leave Act, benefits for COVID-related illnesses. Under this law, workers may receive full pay for up to 80 hours of work or 2 weeks of paid sick leave if they or a member of their family become ill from the new virus. Additionally, the law provides up to 10 weeks of sick leave at 2/3 the normal salary. And I can see some comments popping up from one of our attendees. So I'm going to ask Kelsey to read those, if you would please, Kelsey.
Sure. So there was a comment from the Facebook Live first that shared that this is not the district's fault. The state changes information daily. Then some of the comments from Zoom. There's a calculator that is available that can tell you how many people can safely be in a room given the area. And we'll link to that calculator in the chat and on the Facebook Live here in just a second. Someone else shared, I think there are very serious concerns regarding special education compliance this term. And then for the FFCRA, you must prove illness from COVID for that Family First Coronavirus Relief Act.
Right.
Can I speak to the special ed part of that?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, that's one thing that's really kind of a problem, that most districts have said, oh, you know, if you're special ed, you can come in 4 days a week. But the problem with special ed is that if you talk to any special ed teacher or professional, most students don't just have one issue. It comes in clusters. And so what do you do if you have, you know, an autistic child who also has an immune problem? How do you manage to take care of them without putting them at harm? And so, or somebody with limited mobility. You know, it's really going to be tough for them. It's going to be tough for those families. And I don't know many districts who have really addressed that. And that's always an issue, is that special ed kids are kind of always sort of an afterthought.
Yes, and I'm also concerned knowing that in many instances, especially with a special ed student who has physical limitations, how can you help that student and socially distance yourself? That it doesn't add up.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, they're throwing stuff at the wall. And like somebody said, the state's changing things on a daily basis. So, I mean, we also need to address this at a state level.
Yeah.
But,
I did see a question in the chat for you, Samay. Are you on a screen that you can see the chat?
Yeah, that is the thing, is that high stakes testing is a problem that has been, I mean, the problem with high stakes testing is that it does not work.
And I'm sorry, what is high stakes testing?
That would be the MAP test, the PARC test, which the PARC test was so bad that they couldn't cancel it, but due to a lawsuit, they couldn't find a replacement. Now it's called the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. By the same manufacturer, it's equally bad. And a researcher 2 or 3 years ago looked at the PARC test. These high stakes tests, the high stakes tests are what are used to evaluate teachers.
Oh, okay.
And the students.
Right.
We're the only country in the world that takes these tests and uses them to evaluate teachers. You see something like this in South Korea with horrible results on student health, but they don't even use that to judge teachers. And the high stakes tests are useless. Several people have run through them and analyzed the data. And if you enter in a student's zip code, you can be within about 2 to 3% of their score. That's simply it. It's just how rich you are, how rich you are, how rich your parents are. And we're using this to rate schools, rate teachers. Funding from the federal government is based on these high stakes testing. And what I saw in the chat, there's no relief. We're going to keep testing this year.
Oh no.
And it's ridiculous.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right. So that's yeah. All right. Well, thank you for pointing that out, because that's something important for people who work in legislation to be aware of. So I appreciate that.
And what are kids supposed to do? How do you remote take a test? What if your internet connection isn't as good as the other kids?
Right.
What if you don't have a quiet place to take the test? It just, we're going to see some awful results, and it's going to have a terrible effect on our schools.
Yep. So the next, I'll go ahead and read the next question I asked the local union representative is, how are teachers feeling about having to work in the classrooms? And the answer is most teachers who have responded use words like nervous, anxious, uncomfortable, and worried about going back to in-person teaching. They do not feel that they have enough solid information to feel safe. They have many unanswered questions and feel that when specific questions are asked, they are given vague answers that do not reassure them or help them with planning for their own family's health and safety. And I did speak to that a little earlier about like measuring the classrooms. Our understanding, I think I may have that further down, but we're not aware that our local schools have measured the classrooms and are prepared for the number of parents who might choose in-person learning. It seems to be, certainly for the parents and the teachers, it seems to be a little bit backwards, rather than the district saying these are the numbers of students that we can accommodate in our schools. They're waiting to see how many people want to come in the building, and then they'll have to reevaluate. And I see a comment that there's no logistical way they can prepare for it.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
it's another.
I think it was Plainfield up in Will County. They said, "Oh, we've got a couple of schools we shut down. We're going to reopen them," and then the and so
Sima, you're kind of cutting out just a bit, and Carla, you were muted for that last bit there. So I don't know if you want to try again with your last comment.
Yeah, I was just saying that I couldn't quite hear Sime there. I'm going to go on to the next question that I asked was, are teachers being reassured by our local administrations? And not one teacher polled felt reassured. They all mentioned a lack of a specific district plan, which makes them feel confident about returning. The teachers posed questions about sick leave. Who will quarantine if someone in their own family or classroom tests positive? Who will take over for them if they test positive? Do they have to use their own sick days? Who will substitute? How will the trauma of the past months have already affected students? And what will they be feeling if we go back to in-person teaching and then to remote again? They expressed anxiety over not being able to see loved ones who are either elderly or who have compromised health issues once they go back to in-person teaching for fear of spreading the virus to them. And many parents are worried about the health of grandparent caregivers for students. Are these, so I would guess that these are things that you're also hearing or
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing, is that some of our best teachers are the ones who have been in the district for 30 years.
Mhm.
And those teachers are reaching the ages where they're vulnerable and their family members are vulnerable. And yeah, if a teacher doesn't feel comfortable, I don't know what the administration, uh, the administration needs to listen to teachers. They need to listen to teachers on everything. But yeah, I think that's absolutely right. If teachers don't feel comfortable about their own safety, then we need to change the approach.
Right. And the next comment regarding how teachers are feeling is that although most teachers would have wanted to be back in the class with their students during normal times, they feel that it is not safe for all involved at this time and feel that it will only last a short time before there are positive cases and they will have to go back to remote. Many mention not worrying for themselves, but for family members, especially since there is no data on long-term or lasting effects, which we know I talked about earlier about, we're seeing these cases of people who recover from COVID, but they do have debilitating long-term effects that they're experiencing. And then the next question I asked of the local union rep is, are you aware of teachers writing their wills and obituaries? And the answer is many people said they have already contacted someone about expanding life insurance, estate planning, and wills, just in case. And then the next question that I asked was that I've heard about teachers asking for early retirement, and I'd like to know if teachers were given an option to teach remotely. And again, teachers in District 87 were allowed to apply for remote teaching with the stipulation that only a small percentage would be chosen, and those with health concerns or a family member with health concerns would be given first priority. One teacher said that she most certainly would have applied for remote, but didn't want to take the opportunity away from someone who had either health issues or had a child that had compromised health issues. And another teacher mentioned thinking long and hard about a year's leave of absence due to the stress of these decisions. And then the next question was about measuring out the students, and the teachers are not aware if their classes have been measured. They feel like they are not being given straight answers to questions such as these. They would like a solid plan, a cap on the number of students that can be in a class with a certain number of square footage. And of course, this calculator is available. So once we know with each of our local school districts how many students have chosen in-person learning, then hopefully they will take those numbers and make those calculations and see if these students can be accommodated. And then the last question I had for local teachers is, is about striking. Are they likely to strike? And the teachers said they don't want to strike, but they will do whatever is necessary to support what the BEA decided. Most felt that a strike would not solve the issues at hand. They want to teach their students in the safest, most effective way possible. So of course, so then, you know, the statewide effort is, of course, for everyone to start remote, just like you said earlier, Samay, that's really what we'd rather see. As much as we want our children to be with their preferred teachers in person, I think we all understand that it's really not the safest choice at this time, and we are putting teachers under an incredible amount of stress and danger. All right, that's all that I have for the questions and answers that were submitted to me by email. And I want to ask Kelsey what other questions and comments we might have at this time on Facebook or in the chat.
Thanks, Carla. There was a comment, just a clarifying comment that calculator may not be the calculator that school districts will be using to calculate the distance for the school buildings, but it's something that perhaps, you know, concerned parents could to get kind of a ballpark estimate.
Right.
And that is all at this time.
Okay, so there's no questions on no questions or comments on Facebook.
Not currently, no.
Okay, all right. Last thing I'm going to do here is read a statement from the two teachers unions, teacher and staff unions in Illinois, the IEA and the IFT. It's a joint statement. No avenue or action is off the table. The courts, the Illinois Education Labor Relations Board, nothing including health and safety strikes. The entire weight of the IEA and the IFT will be used in whatever way is necessary to protect the students and the staff who educate them. If a return to learning plan is not safe, we will act. Our working conditions are our students' learning conditions. Unions were founded on workplace safety. The COVID-19 pandemic brings us back to our roots. This is the power of belonging to a union, to be able to collectively stand to protect those who need it, employees, students, and their families. We especially need to protect those students who live in communities where healthcare is lacking, non-existent, or unaffordable. We are in this together, and we are in this to keep everyone healthy, safe, and learning. And as I was reading, I did see some comments pop up there.
I just want to say that that is tragic that teachers have to use that strong of language to keep their students safe.
And themselves and their families.
Yeah.
We're all connected.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, they are being great advocates, and I really wish that the state and the district were matching them with that kind of passion. What we need is that kind of, and parents have been very vocal as well about what they want. And that's what we need, is a little bit more action and some help from the state. One number I looked up is that on March 13th, when the governor suspended school, there were 46 cases across the entire state of Illinois. On April 17th, when he canceled school for the remainder of the school year, the 7-day average was 1329 cases per day. Currently,
over 1,000 cases per day.
Well, about 1,300 cases per day.
Yeah.
Currently, we're at an average of 1,500 cases.
Right.
So it's not going away.
Yeah.
And
it's much worse.
Yeah. So
it doesn't add up. I do. I opened up the chat here, so that's why I'm looking off to the side. There's a question for Samay. What is Illinois, your organization, hoping to work on with parents in Central Illinois after the November election? If you're able to talk about that at this time.
I mean, the problem is that nobody knows what's going to happen in November. So, you know, as with everything else currently in the government, things change. Something pops up on Twitter, and God knows what's going to happen. But
in Illinois, though, in Illinois.
So one of the big things that's really affecting schools is the funding. We're working on the fair tax issue right now. Just, you know, it makes no sense to have a flat tax in a state like Illinois. Or it makes no sense to have a flat tax in general, but especially
right.
Illinois.
Well, and you know, a big part of the fair tax amendment would be to take the burden off of property tax for school funding.
Yeah.
If we can gain extra funding from people who earn $250,000 as a single earner or more
After deduction.
After deductions, and you know, we're not, you know, we're talking about 3% of the population. 97% of the population is not going to see their taxes go up. We're talking about the wealthiest people paying their fair share, and that's going to make a dramatic difference to school funding in this education funding in the state of Illinois.
Yeah, so that's really going to change what our goals are. If we get fair tax passed, the legislature was able to pass an evidence-based school funding model 2 years ago, and it's no matter what the evidence is, the state doesn't have the money to fully fund it. And so if the fair tax passes, what we're going to be working on is across the state, making sure that the evidence-based model is followed and that the appropriate adjustments to state law and ISB procedure are done. And one of the things with the evidence-based model is that it did send more money to districts like District 5 and District 87, which people didn't expect or realize, and it has, but it also has that those districts need more money. They're the ones who are still, they're not getting the money to match what the formula says. And so trying to make sure that policies are being implemented and that when these states get, when the districts get more money, that the money is being used in an effective manner to promote the health and well-being of students, and especially those in need. So I saw in the notes, fully funded arts programming. That's a big thing. Another thing that we're working on is physical health. This last year we had a bill to standardize recess across the state. There is no recess mandate in the state. Federal districts have no recess whatsoever.
Oh my.
So that's something that we'd like to see changed. And
yes,
really the other thing is we need to fix this high stakes testing.
Yes.
I
agree with you there as a parent. I was actually very upset when I realized that one reason my son was unhappy at one point in school is because they were spending an inordinate amount of time prepping for this test instead of doing the learning that he was enjoying.
Yeah, I just had a discussion today with a parent that students aren't being taught either cursive or typing because neither of those are on standardized tests. It's just assumed that you know how to type. And so you get a lot of kids doing the hunt and peck method.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was able to go to a school where I learned both because we weren't focused on typing like that. So, you know, just if you get rid of the standardized, all these, God bless them, but some of these older folks who love to complain about schools these days, they complain about cursive and how you don't learn cursive. And if you want to learn cursive, which I don't think is necessary, get rid of the standardized test and let the teachers have the time to teach it.
Samay, we have a shout out. Would you mind reading those names for me?
Shout out to Ankur and Tanvi Singh for pushing the opt-out. And I love that. And I love my Desi brothers and sisters for fighting no matter where you are in the state, being rabble rousers. As an aside, my grandmother just had her 97th birthday, and she was threatened with jail in her 20s and was thrown out of college for the Quit India movement. And now hassles my dad about ethical purchases at the store. So
oh, right on. I love it.
Encore and Tanvi at 97 are still causing as much trouble.
Right. Yeah. Yes. And shout out for the it was the 2014 park walkout at Normal Community High School,
which is so great. A lot of students are terrified of walking out, especially the high achieving students. And,
Sure.
It takes a lot of guts, but it made a difference. Illinois pulled out of park, and so we're going to keep fighting.
Yeah, great. All right. Well, before we say goodnight, are there any more questions that have come up that I'm not able to see?
Thanks for checking in, Carla. There are no additional questions or comments at this time, but we do have the recording going, and those links are available on the Facebook Live. So if you want to check those out after the event, feel free to check out Carla for IL88 on all social media, and especially on Facebook is where you'll find those links.
Yeah.
Yep. And all of these town halls that I do are on my YouTube channel. Which is available, I think through my Facebook page, but definitely through my website. There's a button on my website, which is Unite88, UNITE 88.org. And you can click the YouTube button and see every town hall I've done so far if you want to check it out. And the parent discussion we had on Friday was really, really good. And, if you're interested in some of the parent issues that we were talking about, we covered a lot more of that on Friday. And so thank you, Samay, for joining me tonight and for being part of this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for bringing this up. Not enough people are doing this across the state. It's just, there's a lot of silence, and a lot of parents don't feel like they're represented, and they're doing it.
Well, and the teachers, it's if you're currently employed, you don't necessarily want to be speaking out against your employers.
Yeah.
So as community members and parents, we want to support our teachers. We want to treat them with empathy and kindness and understanding.
Yeah, and Julie Lynn did a great job on Friday, and that list of questions she put together was very comprehensive. And
yeah, it was great. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us tonight, and I'll say goodnight. And if you'd like to come back on Thursday night, I'm going to talk about vote by mail and some of the questions, common questions that come up about vote by mail. So good night, everybody.